All right. Welcome everyone to this live event about leadership and sustainability. This event is hosted as a collaboration between Abilator and Echo Consulting. Your moderators today are myself, Christina from Echo Consulting, and Reidar Støran from Abilator. And with us today, we have three very engaged speakers. We have sustainability champion, Charlotte Wolff-Bye. We have Professor of Leadership, Rune Todnem, and we have NHH student, Stian Sandbekkhaug, to help us explore the topic of leadership and sustainability. So, some practical information. This event is streamed live on Facebook and on our landing page. It should be possible to post questions to the speakers on the Facebook page. But if not, you can also send your questions to my email, christina@echoconsulting.no. But first of all, why have we set up this event? I think it's no doubt that sustainability is a very important topic at the moment. And it's becoming more and more evident that business has to take their responsibility in reaching the Sustainable Development Goals. But how easy is it really for an organization to change and to start the journey towards sustainability? Both Reidar, myself, and our colleagues have worked with changing organizations for years. And based on our experience, this is something that requires a lot of effort and it takes time. For when it comes to sustainability, there's a shift in how you look at the strategic perspective. You cannot only look at the economic profit anymore. You have to take into account environment and social aspects, for example. Within the organization, it also requires a change in the organizational culture, which is dependent on, amongst other, a high degree of employee involvement, changing ways of working, developing new skills, and not to forget a change in the mindset. And we feel that this needs to be focused more on, and we need to explore it more. So with that being said, please welcome our first speaker, Stian Sandbekkhaug. So Stian, please, could you tell us a little bit more about yourself and your point of view on this topic?
Yeah, thank you, Christina. I appreciate the opportunity to speak in front of, with a great group of people, both in front of the camera and behind the scenes. As she said, I am a master's student at NHH, double majoring in the SEMS program with a degree in international management, and in the energy major, which is a pretty good background for this specific topic regarding leadership and sustainability. Prior to NHH, I completed my undergrad back in 2017 at the University of North Carolina, Wilmington, in the USA, where I majored in supply chain management. After that, I worked for Amazon for 2 years. Don't like to talk about that, but that's why it gave me such a strong basis to figure out what goes well in leadership, what can be worked on, and also the sustainability practices that can be improved upon. As a Canadian, Norwegian, Filipino, I've seen many different cultures and societies and the emphasis they put on sustainability and leadership. So it's been kind of interesting seeing worldwide difference in these two topics. Specifically, there are two things I want to talk about: what we as students expect from employers, and what is expected of us as students, as the next generation, to kind of rise up and no longer create the change, but manage it for future generations. So what do we expect from ourselves and employers? From a sustainability standpoint, there's an argument to be made that sustainability should be driven from a consumer perspective, as companies will only provide what the demand calls for. However, there's also a rebuttal that suggests that firms, specifically the employers, should be the internal mechanism driving change. Now, there is no universal answer to whether one party should be fully responsible for the change we want to see. It should be a split responsibility that requires active participation and accountability. From an employer's standpoint, they should be willing to devote resources to the future and not see these investments as a net loss, but rather they are part of something much greater that nobody can do alone. I think all employees or potential employees are expecting companies to have some degree of sustainable practices. We're no longer seeing the era of maximizing the firm profits or doing something for the short-term gain. It's not something that can happen overnight, but the foundation of change has already begun as we see the green shift taking place worldwide. Now, switching over to what is expected of us as future leaders, as the future of the workforce, and how we can contribute to setting up a more sustainable future. As students, especially many of us who are actively here, there is a strong emphasis on wanting to be a part of the change that's happening now. And it's up to us as the rising generation to help shape the future. Like our predecessors, we see that there is a huge demand that ideally should have been started 50 years ago, but rather than starting 10, 20 years in the future, I think there's no better time than today. This culture shift that's been setting up the last couple of decades, I think has really kind of exploded these last 5, 10 years. And I think it's a really good change and a much needed one. From an individual level, I think if cost is the biggest barrier preventing us from leaving a lower carbon footprint, that's okay, we can mitigate that. I think what's more important is the education and awareness. From a leadership perspective, we are in a rather unique position as we are learning to be a leader while both simultaneously trying to be a good leader. And even more challenging in the age of digitalization, it has been tough to develop ourselves and those around us. But we still have to adapt to the situation and find a way to rise up to the challenge. There's much more I want to talk about, but as the youngest of the three, I think there is much more to be learned from Charlotte and Rune. And I think that's a pretty good segue to hand it off to Christina to introduce Rune.
Thank you, Stian. I really like that you're bringing up just not only the kind of what you expect from employers, but also that you actually need to take a responsibility yourself. So thank you so much for your remarks. So Rune, could you please tell us a little bit about yourself and your point of view on this topic?
Yeah, thanks for the invitation. Thanks, Stian. It's interesting to listen to you, and we might have some debate going to and from in a bit. So my name is Rune. I returned to Norway in 2019 after about 20 years in the UK, and I'm currently a professor of leadership at the University of Stavanger Business School. I'm also about to become a UNESCO chairholder of the UNESCO Chair of Leadership, Innovation and Anticipation. I'm also lucky enough I'm going to do a little bit of sales. That's okay. I'm editor-in-chief of a journal, Change Management, Reframing Leadership and Organizational Practice. I've been given a little bit of time today to share my views on leadership. You might also be interested in just checking out my TEDx talk, which I was lucky enough to hold here in Stavanger a couple of years ago. It's a lot of sales now, isn't it? Get a grip, Rune. Anyway, so I look at leadership as really important for us to find solutions to the current situation or crisis we find ourselves in. But the challenge is that at universities, in business schools, and in organizations where we spend a lot of time and resources on leadership, education, training, and development, we don't actually talk much about leadership. And by that I mean we don't talk much about leadership as something we do as a process, because we are rather leader-centric. So we are very much focused on the individuals, the formal role holders. So we're still spending too much time talking about characteristics and traits and so on. And I think in order for us to deliver on the Sustainable Development Goals and beyond, we need to revisit and reframe our view of what is leadership. We should be able to talk about leadership without talking about leaders. And I'm going to refer to a great book called Leadership from 1978, it was, by Burns, where he states that we are preoccupied by leaders. And these are his words. You know, we are preoccupied about what they look like, what they wear, what they have for breakfast, what car they drive. Of course, it's a Tesla these days, isn't it? What kind of pet they have, what they do in the bedroom, and so on. But this focus on individual former leaders end up with a situation where we don't talk enough about leadership. So what I want to take a few minutes to focus on is exactly that, the process of leadership, because there are alternatives in our way of educating and training and developing leadership. The typical approach is to focus on what is called the kind of the triangle approach, if you like, where we're looking at whatever we call it, if we call it servant or transformational, transactional, these are all very old theories, by the way, and misunderstood very often. We're looking at leader or leaders, the relationship with the followers, which is not a great word. Who wants to be a follower? And then this relationship, how we can deliver on shared goals. Very often these goals are not shared at all. But this triangle approach to leadership, both theory and practice, really just emphasize the focus on the individual leader. There is an alternative that was introduced some years back in 2008 called the DAC ontology, a DAC approach, which I have tried to contribute to. The DAC approach by Dratt et al. Suggests that rather than focusing on that relationship between leaders and followers in order to deliver on shared goals, we should focus on the production, excuse me, the production of direction, alignment, and commitment. My contribution in my latest articles published this year, called Leadership in Pursuit of Purpose, suggests that we replace direction with purpose. So leadership should be about the production of purpose instead of the direction bit, and then alignment and commitment, of course. So this is a good topic to just throw into discussions. So we can agree or disagree, that's fine, but we really need to revisit what we mean by leadership. Who can perform leadership? Who can contribute to leadership? At the moment, we still think there's a small elite club of a limited number of individuals, very often with similar background, that can contribute to leadership. And I suggest that is wrong. And it's not a great starting point if we are to deliver on the Sustainable Development Goals. Also, in trying to establish a reframing or discussion of what is leadership, I have recently developed and introduced what I call the TELUS leadership lens. And the idea here is to, rather than saying this is the right way of doing things, because there is no right way, at least I haven't found it yet, I suggest that as a lens, we can put this approach, which I'm going to introduce to you very quickly soon, on top of our current approach to leadership. And this TELUS leadership lens consists of three elements, if you like. So three elements. And the first element suggests that leadership is responsibility of the many, including you and me, not a privilege of the few. And I argue that leadership, training, development, education is still delivered in such a way that it is for a group of privileged individuals. The second element is really a definition in working. And it suggests that leadership is the collective pursuit of delivering on purpose. So something we're doing together. We might play different roles at different times, but we all have a responsibility, and some of us have greater responsibilities at certain times. But it suggests that leadership is nothing without purpose. And then the third and last element suggests that leadership purpose is to be guided by what is referred to as internal goods. So for example, what is best for the most? And that could be when we're looking at Sustainable Development Goals, for example. That is looked at as different to what is referred to as external goals, which is a bit typical still, which is how do we increase power, influence, and money as end goals in themselves. Not suggesting that power, influence, or money is wrong or bad, but how do we use this power, influence, and how do we use this money? That's the question. So this was a TELUS leadership lens with the three different elements, which I hope we might get some questions on and we might be able to debate. And then I want to bring that into a different kind of language, which I developed with the Public Leadership Foundation. It's a foundation based in the Netherlands, PLF short. And just one practical advice, if you ever are to start an organization or foundation, you need to check out abbreviations first. Are they taken by someone else? Because we went for Public Leadership Foundation, PLF, signed up, formalized the name, only then to find out it was already taken by someone else, the Penguin Liberation Front. That's not us, okay? But anyway, what we developed there was a focus on being mad, so making a difference. And this is very much what I'm talking about in my TEDx talk, from 2019. So it's this great belief that we can't say that it's not our responsibility. It's above my pay grade. That's her job, or that's his job. Nothing to do with me. Or I have to wait until I spent at least 15 years in this company before I can take on that responsibility. So making a difference, and we all are making a difference. It's just a question, are we making enough of a difference? Can we make more of a difference? And to guide this effort, if you like, and it's not about molding, it's not about producing a whole bunch of people coming out from business schools looking the same, dressing the same, thinking the same. It's too much of that already. We need more critical thinking, and a lot of business schools and others are doing great work here, but we can do more. But to facilitate this focus on being mad, working on our own madness, if you like, we have further developed it by focusing on them being epically mad. So that these are more abbreviations. You see, I love abbreviations. Hopefully we can remember some of them. So in epically mad, the E is for energy, where we really believe that we all have energy. You know, we wake up in the morning and hopefully we had a good night's sleep, and you know, we charge the phone, like my mom always tell me, Rune, don't charge the phone by the bed while you sleep, because you read something in a newspaper by some house burning down. It can happen, but I keep doing what my mom tells me not to. So how do we energize ourselves? How do we energize others? So for example, in Public Leadership Foundation, the way we distributed tasks was about, that energizes me, I'll do that. Numbers doesn't energize me, so I was not in head of finance. Then the P is for purpose, and a really good book here is by Collins and Porras, Built to Last, where they talk about purpose beyond profit. It's not purpose or profit. They're looking at 18 companies, all private sector, all but one headquartered in the US, and then you have Sony in Japan, and they found out the only thing they could identify they had in common that made them so much better as an investment than anyone else is they had a purpose beyond profit, that a purpose driving profit. For example, it could be health, yeah, saving lives. And they said, if we do our job, if we deliver on our purpose, we will make money for our owners, our shareholders. Then we have the I for identity. I'm just keeping an eye on the watch here. I for identity. Again, we grow up in a world where it's often about not being ourselves. Organizational leaders become more and more like political leaders. By that I mean they don't give you a straight answer, because they don't know what is the right answer. Is it the right answer tomorrow? We need identity. We need authenticity. We need to be able to stand up and say, this is what we believe in, and this is what we don't believe in. These are my values. This is what I stand for. This is what I do, and this is what I will never do. That's a responsibility we have, and that's an area where we can all develop. And then we have C for courage, because it takes courage to be yourself. It takes courage to make an effort. It takes courage to ask a question. We've all been in meetings where we don't, what are we talking about? Everyone else seems to know what we're talking about. I don't know, but I'm not going to ask, because someone's going to look silly. It takes question to ask, what is this? What is this abbreviation? And once you ask, you'll find out you're not the only one. So if someone else asks, you can just jump in and say, yeah, I wondered the same. So you can provide a bit of support. Okay, so courage to be ourselves. Courage to try, courage to fail, courage to learn, and courage to bump back up and try again. And then the glue word, as I call it, is ally. So epically mad. So ally is the word that combines epic with mad. And this is about working together. It's about identifying allies, not people that have to look the same or think exactly the same like us, but allies who wants to pull in the same direction that we want to pull. For example, towards contributing to the Sustainable Development Goals. So some final words. I think in order for us to deliver on the Sustainable Development Goals, we need to revisit leadership, how we educate and train and develop leadership. It's a shared responsibility. We all have potential to contribute. And we need to look at the role of then purpose in building both leadership and what I refer to as change readiness. So in organizations, we need to focus much more on building levels of change readiness rather than demolishing what is often referred to as change resistance. And this resistance, what is it? You know, very often it's another word for engagement. And engagement is something we want. So why don't we want more resistance? That's me for now. I'm going to hand back over.
Thank you, Rune. It's always very inspiring to listen to you. I'm learning so much when we're discussing these topics. I got a question from someone who was looking at the event on Facebook, if there were any slides. So I just wanted to inform you that we don't have any slides from the presenters today, but we can certainly share links and references and so on afterwards. I know, Rune, you probably have lots of them. But thank you, Rune. So our final speaker today is Charlotte. Please, Charlotte, tell us a little bit about yourself and your thoughts around this.
Well, thank you very much, Christina Marie, and thank you for having me. I think this is a very topical conversation. And we heard from Stian, of course, about the expectation on business and the green shift happening worldwide. And then from Rune about how you have to be epically mad to deliver on those expectations. So I wanted to reflect a little bit on what it means for a practitioner. So I've been working in sustainability for most of my life, always for big business. And so I wanted to reflect a little bit on the zeitgeist today, and also how you can be epically mad, to borrow Rune's words, to deliver on this agenda. But I also wanted to mention, maybe advertise a book that I contributed to recently. It's called Corporate Sustainability in Practice by Professor Paolo Taticchi from the University College London, and it's just been published by Springer. So my thoughts are also anchored in the piece that I wrote for that book. But first of all, we heard from Stian that there's so much change in the air. But we're still in a pandemic. Over the last year, we've had such incredible global health concerns. 4 billion people worldwide have been affected by various lockdown measures. And at the same time, we wiped out decades of economic progress. But regardless, I would say I'm very upbeat about the future. But just like Stian, I can sense this change in the air. There really is. Never, I feel, during my career, I've seen this explosion of expectations and changes in societal norms. Besides the current pandemic and health crisis, the most urgent challenge is climate change. But also, we've never seen such a unprecedented, or there's an unprecedented level of public concern linked to that too. So, for instance, we got the Friday for Future marches by school children led by Greta Thunberg, the whole notion of building back better. And then you have the trade unions talking about there's no jobs on a dead planet. Everybody, all constituencies in society really want to see a greener, better future. And of course, the pandemic has also shone the light on the deep-rooted inequalities in society. Over the past sort of 150 years, industrialization has really brought a lot of progress for society, but inequality really has stuck. And I think people have had enough. And the World Economic Forum really reflects on this really well, actually, in some of their materials around how the middle classes are losing out and people are genuinely calling for a just transition and building back better. Now, how does this manifest itself for somebody like me or the business that I work for? And there's a few sort of trends or real activities I can see happening now in the world. So first of all, we see policies and regulations incentivizing green growth like never before. And then you have the environment, social and governance related factors in investments, the so-called ESG, that are really moving from a niche market, investor market, to the mainstream. But also then we see new strategies for new business models. For instance, over the last year, several oil and gas companies have announced net zero strategies, setting the scene for new business models in the energy sector. We've not seen that ever before. There's also an expectation that business or industrial activity must serve societal goals, because the pandemic has really shone the light on the intrinsic link between human health, economic prosperity, climate change, and nature. And it's clear that public policy and private sector must work together to deliver more and faster. And I think a good example on this is in the UK government's 10-point plan for green industrial revolution that was announced quite recently by a prime minister. This is about net zero emissions by 2050 and creating 250,000 green jobs. It's about competitiveness, climate change, and economic regeneration. But it's not just a public policy. It really needs to be driven by the private sector. And finally, I would also say that you can really see now technology and nature-based solutions coming to the fore. So there's a resurgence in innovation and technology, and especially in the energy sector where I'm in, you get carbon capture, utilization and storage, renewable power, and battery storage and distribution solutions. And these new technologies may actually deliver a green industrial revolution, just as the steam engine enabled the industrial revolution earlier. But of course, technology alone can't deliver the future we need, and we must also focus on conserving and restoring the natural ecosystem. And you see more and more activities in this field. But so all these changes and all these sort of effects that you can see and perceive and have become really real for a business or for a practitioner like me, how do you actually manage the change, and how do you put your leadership mark on sustainability for your organization? And here I have sort of 3 steps which very much tally with what Rune was saying. So the first thing is like preparing for change. Companies need to get into the healthy habit of leading in constant change. Of course, it's counterintuitive because business loves basically stable operating environments. But you really need to learn how to secure your future success. And you only do that by anticipating and being well prepared for change, taking selective risks, and anticipating barriers, and taking decisive steps towards sort of new goals. But for that, you need to create a culture for change. And for that, you need your employees. You really need to empower every level of the organization to understand, to really have better awareness around sustainability issues and let them kind of get on with it. The second point, or the second step, I would say, is about standing up for change. So business, of course, has this tremendous capability of innovating, financing, and delivering needed solutions. But for society to keep up the pace to deliver on the sustainable future we all want, business, and I would claim business, must take a stand on issues and call for change that is in public interest. And this is also expected on business. Last year, the Edelman Global Trust Barometer noted that 92% of the global respondents found it important for company CEOs to speak out on social issues. And there are many examples on this. And of course, you see it especially in the US around Black Lives Matters, but also on the climate side. But the third step really is to lead the change. Business is an essential part of functioning society, so they must take an active role. And here we heard about purpose, and really purpose-led strategies, I think, are absolutely essential. The British Academy just concluded a wonderful piece of work and research around the purpose of business. And they kind of concluded that the purpose of business is to solve economic, environmental, and social problems profitably and not profit from causing problems. I don't think you can run a big business today without serving a societal goal. But how do you get there? How do you lead the change? For that, I think you need to nurture sustainability competence. Leaders need to understand the context behind issues and how they relate to broader trends. You have to have fluency in emerging environmental and social trends and include data analysis around that into your decision making. And really the key accomplishment would be to internalize this through your organizational design. And this is kind of what keeps people like me and my fellow practitioners very busy. How do you internalize social environmental understanding in the organization? And here I want to just reflect briefly on a recent experience I had. Over the last year, I actually was working with Christina Marie here we've sort of adopted the agile and lean methodologies. And I think these two sort of ways of working are phenomenal when it comes to sustainability activities in companies. Because right now there's so much change. You might not quite know what you need to respond to, how to be responsive, where you might actually need to go. The direction's not always clear. So to be able to adopt a way of working that's agile, which means that you can allow quick fails, recalibrate and move on, and constantly kind of deliver as part of the process, is hugely helpful. And I think this agile and lean processes really is something that will become essential in the toolbox of delivering on sustainable practices in organizations. And finally, I just also wanted to mention that an individual company contribution isn't enough in delivering towards sort of common purpose goals. And the United Nations calls for radical and unprecedented cooperation. And this is something that we need to learn how to do. It's clunky, it's difficult to work across sectors, but it's the only way going forward. And there are some good examples here, and I just wanted to highlight a couple. One is Walmart's Project Gigaton, where they focus on their supply chain to remove 1 gigaton of CO2. Mars, the confectionery business, has a similar plan where they look at improving working conditions of 1 million people in the supply chain. But also you have many coalitions and alliances, for instance, the Alliance to End Plastic Waste, Global Water Initiative, and so on. So I think this is now happening. The toolbox is half full, but we're kind of learning on the job right now on how to deliver this better future. It's all about change, and I think change management tools and practices is really something that we all need to improve on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Charlotte. It's very nice that you could share some of your insights. I know you've been working with sustainability, as you say, most of your life. So it's really nice. And of course, I've been working with Agile a lot, as you mentioned. So I'm really happy to hear that you see that this is a very good fit also with trying to drive an organization towards sustainability. So I don't see that we have any questions yet from any of the ones that are listening in, but I know you also have some questions for each other. So maybe Stian, would you like to start with some of your reflections from hearing Rune and Charlotte, and also maybe you have some questions for them?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess one of the first things I want to ask that wasn't shared necessarily, but something that is curious for me, I mentioned it a little bit at the beginning of my introduction, is with the age of digitalization, it's been increasingly tough on my end as someone who's currently in a leadership role and trying to develop those around me. So as Charlotte mentioned, with the whole pandemic going on, everything has been shifted online. To both of you, how has your ability, not as a leader, but in leadership practices, been managed over the last year and a half? And what do you think that means for the future as we kind of exit the post-pandemic era in the next, hopefully, year or two?
Charlotte, you want to go first, or should I jump in?
Rune, you go.
Okay, thanks, Stian. In many ways, the pandemic hasn't changed a lot. We just deliver differently, and we found out that it isn't as difficult as we thought to use digital tools. Of course, we had on and off. So when I started semester, we were off campus. It was digital delivery. Then we're allowed to come back on, and now we're digital again. So I think we just become better at using the tools. What is perhaps important is that the main challenges in leadership and organizational change remain the same. That's why I'm an advocate of more focus on purpose. And also what's quite interesting is before we had a lot of questions from students like, do we have to come on campus? How many lectures do we have to attend? Now it's, please, can we come to campus? Please, can we just meet a living human being for a coffee and a chat? Let us on, please. So that's, I think the kind of pandemic have showed us the value of being human beings, and not just the kind of operational, technical view on what we can do with what we have, but no matter how much digitalized environment we operate in, we are human beings. We're not replaced just yet by robots.
So I guess I could have a similar response. In a way, I work for big business, and we were very quick in going online and sort of working from our front rooms, etc. And that's worked very well, fine in many ways. But I think from a sustainability perspective, the pandemic, it's awful. It's absolutely horrendous. You know how it's affected the world, and it's really shone the light on the sort of cracks of our societies. And me sitting in my front room, understanding the unintended consequences of potentially some of our actions by our company or across our value chain, I can't do that from my front room. And I think, so yes, our internal practices actually have potentially become even more efficient, but of course, sustainability is very much about mitigating any risks and also optimizing value for society. In my company, we are making some big investments into the northeast of England, and which is sort of industrial area region of the country, but also with a lot of inequality. It's been really quite difficult to reach out to stakeholders, and especially vulnerable stakeholders, to understand how can we make sure that our presence will create most value for society. So I think online and all that is great, but it actually excludes a big chunk of the world. And as we know with social media, you tend to group alongside like-minded people. So I think there's a lot more we need to understand about this, and hopefully, Rune, your colleagues in the academic world will study this in greater detail to see, you know, what's the consequences of us moving online in a way.
Thank you.
Thank you both, for those answers. Glad to see we already have kind of differences in responses. I think that's what I wanted, at least. And then building a little bit off of what Charlotte said, there was a couple key words that I took out that I was curious to hear more about. One was the sustainability of this actual practice of being online versus the short-term efficiency that's come about of moving online very fast. It's been effective for now, but how long is it really going to be able to manage? Because it is difficult to reach out to stakeholders, to colleagues, even to potential and future employees. So my next follow-up question is, regardless of the age of online digitalization and the pandemic aside, with people being the most important resource or human capital in general, how do you find it's best to manage them in a way that allows for sustainable growth from people, not from a firm maximizing profit or anything like that, but the actual people? Because there's kind of a balancing game of, you want to develop them as much as you can, but you don't want to burn them out or make them over efficient to the point where I don't want to do this anymore. Does that make sense?
Well, I could have a stab at your question, and I guess I want to sort of change maybe the aspect of it a little bit. So digitalization is so incredible, and I just listened to a podcast of 5G. My head can't quite comprehend what it will enable. It's incredible. You can download a movie in 3 seconds, and everything will happen so quickly, and I can't wait in a way. But on the other hand, if I broaden your question a bit, Stian, by making things very efficient, who do you actually exclude? This is not just about access to the latest platforms and digital access, but not everybody work in the knowledge society and might not actually have an aptitude for that. And you are both based in Norway, where I know that there's a very high high school dropout rate, and not every child maybe, or every person needs to work in that knowledge society. I guess what I'm saying is sometimes maybe we don't need to digitalize everything, and we can have people manning those services instead. And for some societies, that's very important. And And I think at some point, business also needs to understand, should we actually keep the people in labor, or should we optimize through systems? And of course, I spent quite a lot of my work in India over the years, and there's always an issue around jobs, you know, and employing people. In South Africa, the same, because it's important to have those role models in society across various social classes. So I think there's bigger questions in this, but thank you, Stian, for your question. I think it's very poignant.
Yeah, thank you. Rune, do you want to have a little bit to say about that, or should we move on to some of the other questions?
Oh, I just want to give a very quick response. And again, words are important. So I think we should focus. Of course, this depends on where and when, yeah, and there are cultural differences, both organizational and national cultures. But I think, for example, you know, you're at the business school, I'm at the business school. We need to focus less on managing others and more on facilitating. You know, we need to move away from this kind of understanding that there's only a small group of people who really wants and really can be agents, and rather than focusing on leaders and agents, focusing on leadership, something we do, and agency, something we can all contribute to. So again, words are really, really important. And again, just to repeat myself, I think by having a clear purpose, and I'm not judging if it's a good or bad, it isn't necessarily black or white, but by having a purpose, that could be kind of as your compass, showing direction, informing all the decision you make. And this is a really good book. I'm doing more sales, it's not myself. Let My People Go Surfing by Yvon Chouinard, the guy that started and is a family-run business still, Patagonia. It's a book that's written for internal use first, and it's doing well. And there's good stories here about purposes and about core values, and they're picking up examples from other industries, including a Swedish company making axes. So very interesting reading.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Rune. I think if this book contains some tip on how to actually change this from the few being leaders and driving everything, and into having the entire organization driving change and so on, that would be very good. So we like promoting stuff like that. But maybe, Rune, you have some reflections and questions to Charlotte and Stian.
Yes, I have one question for both of them. But first, I'm not sure how much time I will get later on. So I just wanted to share a couple of other resources. And again, they're not mine. Just very quickly, if people are on and they ask for PowerPoint. So Charlotte referred quite a bit to anticipation, which I don't think we focus enough on. And anticipation is directly linked to a UNESCO initiative called Futures Literacy. So you can Google search Futures Literacy UNESCO. You come to a homepage that explains it, and it's not about reading the stars or the palm or anything. It's about taking responsibility of forming tomorrow. So tomorrow is not necessarily repetition of today or yesterday, but if we take hands on and say it's not my responsibility, it will be most likely a copy. So on this page, they'll just quickly introduce it, and they give you some more resources. I would also, if I were you, a couple of TED Talks. I would have a look at Rosabeth Kantor's TED Talk, and it's something about up. She got 5 ups, and that was held a couple of years back. That's Rosabeth Kantor, professor at Harvard Business School. And then you have another brilliant one by a lady called Margaret Heffernan. That's also a TED Talk, and she got several ones. But in this one, she got a red blouse and a black dress. That's how I remember. And she's talking about the conflict in a positive way. And she's also talking about purpose and believing in things. You asked me for a question. Here it is. So Charlotte and Stian, the same question for both of you. What do you think is the main kind of leadership challenge moving forward in supporting the delivery of the Sustainable Development Goals? If you could pick one, what is the main leadership challenge? And I would like us to think about leadership as a process involving a lot of people.
Yeah, I can open up with this. As a little bit of my work experience with Amazon, I was thrown into and I'm going to use the word management role because that was in the title, a manager role very early on. And I can't remember which specific sustainable goal, but it's regarding one of the UN SDGs with diversity and inclusion, both from a actual way of diversifying the people around you and also the mindset. So I think a big problem I ran into early on is I surrounded myself with people that were very like-minded in the way of thinking, which was great because they were always positive in like, yeah, that's a great idea, let's go for it. But as I went on, I realized that I really need some conflicting viewpoints or someone to say no, not in the way they're yelling at me, but no, let's think about it from a different perspective. I think one of the main challenges finding these people that are willing to speak up. I mean, in this conference or webinar, a lot of people are here for the same reason. They want to learn about leadership and sustainability, so that's great. But we're also going to run into the issue of everyone's kind of on board with this. What happens when we meet someone whose best interests, or we see as their best interest, is to maximize the profits or minimize waste, but in reality they have a much more underlying cause. So finding a way to include everyone for either different ideals, perspectives, or backgrounds, and also finding those who you wouldn't necessarily view as, or initially think as someone that you want to go to for advice because you haven't always got along in the past, or you think that, oh, they're not going to agree with me, so they're going to get in my way of trying to push this proposal through or initiative through. I think that's something that, again, not black and white at all, but if we can slowly start to mitigate that challenge, I think that'll open more doors than we ever thought possible, because we don't even acknowledge that these doors exist currently.
So you're all about Sustainable Development Goal number 17. It's about partnership, creating partnerships for the change required.
Yeah, so I think Norway has been, or at least at the Norwegian School of Economics, it's been a lot better than the past. I went to previously I went to a school where the school was, I think, 94 or 97% Caucasian, so I stuck out like a sore thumb. But that also kind of segregated me into the minority group where a lot of the, I guess, immigrant population were always together, so it kind of created a strange dichotomy, but it also formed a strong bond where if you didn't have anyone to sit with at lunch, you'd go straight to them versus this other group. But getting out of these social partnerships, I think it's important that not just companies, but people come together. I know it's a lot harder on these online events, but again, just getting these different viewpoints and understanding that even if someone won't agree with you or you have conflicting interests, that it's not necessarily a bad thing. I think it's much more positive to have, like you mentioned, positive conflict, because that's going to challenge you as an individual and make you really kind of reassess that, maybe my way of thinking isn't right, or they bring up a good point. I need to kind of change my mindset because I only know as much as I know, which is why it's so important to reach out to others. But not just myself, but everyone can't be afraid to bring aboard or collaborate with those who aren't necessarily going to be a yes man all the time, if that's a good term to use.
I must say, Stian, those are such wise words, and to live in constant slight discomfort is probably what we should aim for in our organizations. Rune, I would also stick to SDG number 17, and I would say here that the real leadership challenge is collaboration, and especially with unlikely partners, because the Sustainable Development Goals is a government agenda, really. That's where it comes from, with zero hunger and other things, gender and so on, and education. Of course, private sector can contribute greatly towards these goals, but it's not kind of our main purpose necessarily in the world. But to optimize our delivery towards those goals, we must collaborate with others and across sectors. We do this. We do this in industry already, but typically with like-minded organizations, and we have clear contracts. And I would just to explain how difficult it is to work across sectors. I even took a degree at Cambridge to understand how you work. It was called cross-sector partnerships, because it's difficult. It's always uncomfortable. It's difficult to find the partners, and how do you make sure you have a strong delivery? And in sectors really need to work how to do this. And I want to give you an example where I'm not saying it's difficult necessarily, but where this is kind of happening now, maybe a little bit too slowly. But a good example is my own employer, Equinor. We have joined something called Zero Carbon Humber. So the Humber side in the UK is the biggest industrial region in Europe, and we basically we joined forces with other industry, local authority, and other academic institutions to deliver a net zero carbon future for this industrial region. So we have now actually announced the intention to build the world's biggest hydrogen plant there, but this has only come as a result of first of all the blessing, I guess, from government, that they want to see this cross-sector partnership, and as they are incentivizing this, they are calling for private sector activity that contributes to economic regeneration and broader commitments. So this is kind of happening, but it's difficult and it's tricky. And if I may just add one more point to show you the scale of this. In Europe, there are something like 3,000 industrial hubs. 51, is it 3 or 30,000? Sorry, I can't remember now. But it's about 51 million jobs linked to these industrial hubs. And all of these industrial hubs need to go net zero carbon. Can you imagine just the scale of collaboration that needs to happen between citizens, business, community groups, authority, and so on, and education institutions for us to meet just the climate targets alone in Europe? So I think this will be the biggest challenge. And I've taken a degree in this, and I'm not saying I'm an expert, but we can't all be taking degrees in cross-sector partnerships. So I think that's the biggest challenge.
Thank you. I see time is actually flying, but we have a question from someone who is listening in to us, to Charlotte. And it says, I appreciated your comments on the importance of agile and lean approaches. I can see the role of agile in sustainability efforts, and I'm curious about your views on lean approaches. Lean is trying to increase efficiency, which also means more resources may be more locked in. Can this be in conflict with an agile strategy? So this is from Sigbjørn.
Wonderful question. And you know, I'm very sorry, but I'm going to delegate this question because I am a pupil here. I'm hugely excited about these approaches, but I'm not the expert. But around the screen here today, we have a couple of experts. So, Kristina-Marie, maybe you can respond to this question.
Yeah, I can try. So when we work with kind of changing organizations, we very much use both methodologies and techniques from both lean and agile. And what I always try to say when I work with the new teams or organizations, try to say that let's try to figure out what is your problem here, and then find kind of from my toolbox what can help you. So I'm not sure if I would say that it's kind of something that can be in conflict in so much, because I think a lot about when changing an organization, you have to do what is right for the organization, use the methods that is right to kind of solve the things they are struggling with, not to be locked in on this is lean, we are taking the entire toolbox of lean and then we'll just put it in here, neither with agile. So I've been working a lot with Scrum teams and so on, but it doesn't mean that Scrum fits for everyone, right? So I would rather kind of change it to say that it could be, but you have to be wary how you use these things. Use them if they fit.
And if I may just add, as a pupil of these methods, people resist change, and working using these types of methodologies, ways of working and processes, people will not love it necessarily. So you really have to focus on the facilitation to make it a fun and rewarding experiences, because that really is what it is. But people won't open up. You need to help them open up to this. And I think it's interesting to see how stuck we are in our ways. We want to have a clear understanding of where we're going to go and how we're going to get there, rather than making it up as we go along. That's the difference. And this is where we come back to education and business schools. How can we prepare future business leaders to kind of be more agile in their ways of working?
I also see we have another question. We only have 6 more minutes left of the event, so I will take this question also. So how do you cope with the side effects of lean? What kind of challenges do you see? Right after 2008-2009 crisis, Swedbank started OPEX project based on Lean and Six Sigma in Baltic states in order to make more efficient processes and motivated teams. But it turned into cost savings, and most of the employees saw that as a cost reduction tool. We were talking a lot about sustainability, but that didn't really work. So that's a question from Henrika. Anyone wants to say something about this?
I think that's very interesting, and certainly I think it was both new for me and for Christina Marie to work on using sustainability as a case for using these methods, and I'm completely excited about it. Don't quite get it fully yet, I must admit, but so far so good. But I think you're right in that some of these methods have been tarnished through sort of being tagged as cost efficiency measures and so on. But of course, we have other experts around the screen here, so that would be my reflection.
Yeah, I can just add on that. Of course, it is looking at efficiency, but I think that Lean shouldn't be used as kind of, even though you want to save cost, I think Lean is a lot about how can we utilize resources in better ways and not focus on letting people go and so on. So, but Charlotte, maybe you have.
Can I just quickly say, I think if we want to achieve change, if that's organizational change or societal change, we should use the word change much less. Because based on experience, people get a rash when you say change, or they'll think, oh, is my job safe? So I think we need to find, again, words are really important. It's not my background, but we need to find better words, a better language. And then when we introduce or often reintroduce different ways of doing things, we also should perhaps focus more on the core principles of what we do and how we do it, and more importantly, why we do it, rather than the branding or the product itself. Because you have Kaizen, you have Agile, you have Lean, and sure, it will be Mean soon. There are a lot of commonalities. So let's pull out the commonalities. Let's pull out these kind of guiding core principles and take them on board, because then it will be less change. Because then it won't necessarily be a change from Lean to Agile. There will just be an add-on. Here's another thing we can do. Here's another core principle we can take on board. So let's do change, but use a different word.
Yeah. And seeing as it's only 2 minutes until this event closes, I think that will be the final remarks from our speakers today. So just some final words here. I think it's really inspiring to listen to you all. It's really nice of you to join us today. And I think we could have gotten this conversation going for many hours more based on all of your input. But we have to stop now, actually. So I would just like to thank everyone for watching. I see that some has been joining us, which we really appreciate. If you would like more information, you are free to contact us, of course. I see we have some additional questions that has come up that we don't have time for, but we can try to answer them in the chat or get back to you directly if you have sent them by email. So thank you, Stian, Rune, and Charlotte, and thank you all for watching, and have a great day.